Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all honor, glory, and praises to the one and only true living God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to his only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai Mashiach, who the world calls Jesus Christ. And the title of this video is going to be titled, No Matter What Life Brings, Be Instant in season, out of season, right? You know, a lot of times brothers go into this precept, and they break it down in a way to where it's referring to weather, whether it's cold, whether it's hot, whether it's snowing, whether it's raining, so on and so forth, to always continue to abound to do the work of the Lord, and that's one way of breaking it down, but in another way, in a spiritual sense is, no matter what life brings to you, no matter what you go through in life, you always have to have the Most High in the forefront. You got to always still continue, right, to do the works of the Lord and let nothing hinder that. Right? Let nothing stop you from doing the things that God requires. You understand? No matter what it is in life. Because life, there's always going to be ups and downs. It's not going to always be good. There's going to be times where it's bad. When things are not going your way. When certain things happening to you in your life that you never thought would happen. When you're put in certain situations, right? And you have to make certain decisions, and still move in righteousness, no matter what people think or the opinions that they have, because you want to move in the spirit of the Lord, and that's just what it is, right? We're going to start off with 2 Timothy 4 and verse 2. Salakia. It's the book of 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 2. It says, preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, right? So off top, no matter what, we have to preach the word, right? The word of the Most High, right? Preaching the gospel into our people. It doesn't stop because you're going through something in life, because you're having troublous times, because you're going through trials and tribulations. You understand? The work don't stop, And if you're a stand-up person for the Lord, you're going to let nothing hinder that from happening, no matter what it is. No matter what comes your way or what affliction that you are dealing with or going through, you're still going to do the work of the Most High, And that's just what it is, So it says be instant in season, out of season. In season meaning what? When things are going well, when everything is all right, right? When nothing bad is happening, so to say, you got to be instant, right? When things are going good in your life, you still have to preach the word of God. Out of season, meaning what? When things are, all hell's breaking loose in your house, in your household, or in your life. You know what I'm saying? When things are not going your way. You know what I'm saying? Like, you may be put in a position where you're going through certain things, right? You may be dealing with, relationship problems, issues within your marriage, with your children, so on and so forth, with your family, your friends. You may lose people, right? But no matter what it is, you may lose a job, so on and so forth. Whatever it is that you're, you're afflicted with and the trouble that you're going through, no matter what that is, you still have to preach the word of the Most High God, right? It says reprove, rebuke, exhort, meaning you still have to correct, right? In righteousness, you still have to rebuke people and let them know that they're going off and they're wrong, right? And you still have to exhort people, right? When they're dealing with certain things, when they're falling short of, in their walk, when their faith is diminishing, you still have to exhort them and lift them up in a spirit of righteousness and considering yourself, lest that thing comes upon you. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, this walk is not about us. It's about the Most High God. And it's about loving our people as we love ourselves. You know what I'm saying? And that's just what it is. It says, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. And in this walk, the Lord never said that it was going to be easy. A lot of people have that mindset of, or when I start keeping the commandments of God, that I'm just going to start receiving all these blessings in life. Everything is going to go my way. everything's going to be all good, right? I'm never going to have trouble. And, you know, just to be straightforward, like, that's far from the truth. That's not in the Bible. The Most High, look, he told you, when we're going to dive into it, that you're going to go through things as you try to reach the kingdom of heaven. You know, your faith is going to be put on trial, you know? And the way that happens is by you going through certain things in your life to see whether you're going to give up in the time that you're facing troublous times. Is your faith going to diminish, or are you going to continue to do the work of the Lord? Who do you really believe in? Salakia, because if you believe in the Lord, you're going to let nothing stop you from doing the things that God requires, no matter what it is. You know, and it may be hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's not an easy thing when you're dealing with things of the world, or, you know, things in your life. And sometimes things are life-changing, but you still have to stick, you know, stay 10 toes down for the Lord. You still got to stick with the scripts. You still got to stay in your Bible. You know, you still got to, you know, continue to show yourself a righteous man or a righteous sister no matter what. You know, because at the end of the day, you just never know, you know, who may be watching you. Ultimately, it's the Lord watching, but you don't know who you may be exhorting through the Spirit. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't know these things. You know, you don't know who may be looking up to you, you know, and so on and so forth, right? Let's get the book of 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12. It's the book of 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 12. And it reads, Beloved, thinking not strange concerning the fiery trial, right? So when you go through things, you know, in this walk and in life in general, right? But mostly in this walk, because this lesson is, you know, it's for everyone, but mostly it's exhortation to those who are walking in the ways of truth, the ways of the light, which is Yahushua Mashiach, who the world calls Jesus Christ. It's walking in the law, statutes, and commandments of God, that's truly repenting and trying to change their ways. To have in your mind to understand that, hey, everything is not all peaches and cream, man. Everything is not all cake and ice cream. Hey, the Lord said, hey, these scripts, hey, it can be sweet and it can be bitter. You know, and that's just the reality of things. And in this walk, it's the same thing. You know, sometimes you're going to be faced with certain things you're going to have to deal with. Sometimes your situation is going to be put in the forefront for everybody to look at and judge. It is what it is. At the end of the day, you still got to do the work. It says, Beloved, thinking not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you, as though some strange thing has happened unto you. So at the end of the day, it's you know, it may seem strange when you're going through these different things, you know, whether that's, you know, again, losing a significant other, you know, your spouse or your husband, you know, whatever the case may be. Everybody has, you know, they go through different things in life, and some similar. But at the end of the day, like I was talking to one of my good brothers, is no matter what we go through, at the end of the day, we got one thing in common, and that's to fear God and keep these commandments. That's to continue to fight and never give up. That's to continue to do the things that are pleasing in the eyes of the Most High, because He comes first before all things. So we can't think it's strange concerning the fiery trial, because those troublous times and that fiery trial that you're facing is to try you. Right? And it may feel like it's some strange happening, because you don't expect, you know, certain things to happen to you in this walk, but then they happen. And when they happen, how you going to react? What you going to do? You going to give up? You going to stop studying? You going to stop reading? Stop praying? Stop fasting? Stop congregating? Or are you going to go even harder? Right? Because, you know, obviously, when you read the book of Job, and his name came up in the conversation when the Lord said, "Hast thou considered my servant Job?" And now when you go through certain things in life, and especially in this walk, your name came up in the conversation. just like Job. And the Lord said, have you considered my servant such and such? Right? And he's trying to change his ways. And he came out from the dark. He came into this light. And he's really walking after the ways in which I, commanded him to walk. And Satan's going to come and tempt you and disrupt things and try to cause you to fall. But your job is to still be like Job. You can learn a lot from Job. Because no matter what he went through, he understood that the Lord, that he gives, he takes away. The Lord can give you good times and he can take those good times away. The Lord is balanced. And whatever it is that the Lord decides to bring in your life, you still got to stick by the Most High God. Right? Read verse 13. It says, but rejoice in as much as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings. Because even when the Lord himself walked the earth, he went through things. Right? He went through that fiery trial. You understand? And we're not greater than the Lord. So how much more us are we going to have to go through certain things in life? Right? It says, but rejoice in as much as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. Because the Lord, he passed his test. Right? And the Lord, when his glory shall be revealed, when he's sitting upon the throne, right, judging the whole world, and you'll be able to partake in that as well, because when you went through that fiery trial, you didn't give up, right? You kept fighting, you kept doing things for the Lord. And though it was tough, though it was hard, and you still did what was right, right? Though you was faced with the opinions of others and what they think and what they feel, you didn't let it stop you from doing what God wanted you to do. Because at the end of the day, it's the Most High's opinion that matters. You understand? Let's get the book of Acts chapter 14 and verse 22. This walk is not easy, man. You got to stop, listening to these pastors. You got to come out of that mindset of Christianity, of prosperity doctrine, because those things are false. The church, they teach nothing but good times and, so-called good vibes, and everything's going to be all good and all right as long as you give tithes, right? And you have faith and believe, right? But no, the Lord said otherwise, man. Let's get the book of Acts chapter 14 and verse 22. Book of Acts, like you. Chapter 14 and verse 22. And it reads, confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must, through much tribulation, enter into the kingdom of God. You see that? So through much tribulation are we going to enter into the kingdom of God. Through much trouble. We're going to face a lot of troublous times, a lot of affliction, right? We're going to go through hell on earth, so to say. Right? We're going to go through things that, you never thought you was going to go through. As a righteous man or a righteous sister, your faith is going to be tested much more because you're trying to move in righteousness. So therefore, your trial is going to be different from everybody else's. Because everybody else is already following that wide and broad gate that's leading to destruction. So, unless they repent, their judgment is set. But you coming out of that darkness to the light, you're going to be tested much more than the average person to see whether you truly believe or were you just talking the talk. Because we see the Lord, he's a man of action, right? He weighs our actions in a balance. When you read 1 Samuel 2 and 3, right? The Lord don't care about what you say. He cares about what you do. And therefore, you're going to go through certain things in life to see what you're going to do. You're going to still abide by the scriptures, by the ways of the Most High God, or you're going to lean into your own way, right? And destroy yourself, right? I'd rather give myself to the Lord and let him guide me. Let him lead me. Let him teach me. Let him show me through the things that I go through in life, that I may gain the experience, right? The wisdom, right? And that I can understand, so that if another brother goes through the same thing, hey, I'll be able to uplift that brother, you know? I'll be able to help guide that brother and show him what he should do in those times, which is to stick to the Most High, right? Because we're going to go through things in life, man, and that's just the condition of the battle, you know? You know, that's just what it is. It's the book of 1 Peter, chapter 1 and verse 6. It reads, wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptation, right? And a lot of times we go through these trials and tribulations, we go through these things in life, and, you know, it's heavy on the spirit, you know? Temptation is not always just lust, you know, because that's the first thing that comes to brothers' minds or sisters' minds when dealing with temptation. But you could be tempted in many things. When you're going through troublous times, you could be tempted to not want to read your Bible. You could be tempted to try to want to go and move off of emotion and do what you want to do instead of sticking by the scriptures and doing what the Lord told you to do. You could be tempted to not want to be bothered and get counsel, you know, from the men that God set up to counsel you. You know, you could be tempted in many ways, you know. You could be tempted with trouble, you know, and a lot of times those things weigh down the spirit. It weighs you down as a person, to where sometimes you feel like, damn, I just want to just give up. But giving up is not an option. Not when it comes to serving the Lord. Not when it comes down to doing what's right and living righteously, right? There's no turning back. After the Lord and pulled you out of darkness into his marvelous light, there's nothing to go back to. You didn't work all this hard. You didn't work all this time killing the old man, the old woman, and yet a little trouble come and you want to revert back to that old person. You can't. That person it should be dead by now, right? So you got to continue to walk in the ways of the Lord, having faith. It says, verse 7, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried in fire, might be found into praise, right? Because your faith, you know, the trial of your faith is much more precious than that of gold. Because that's what's going on. When you're going through these troublous times, the Lord is putting your faith on trial, right? And it's more precious than gold that's tried in fire. See, when they get gold and they pull it out the earth, it's dirty, it's filthy, has impurities, blemishes. So they put it in that fire to, you know, cleanse it, to get all these impurities out of it so they can shine forth bright on the other side, right? And that's what the Lord is doing through the Spirit. Salakia for the background noise for these dogs, right? But that's what the Lord is doing through the Spirit, you know. When our faith is put on trial and we're going through these things in life, right? The Lord said he chose the furnace of adversity, right? For you know, men that he sees that are acceptable in his sight. You know, so we go through these things in life, you know. But you know, and the Lord does those things because he sees something great in you, right? He sees something better in you, you know, and the Lord wants to bring that out of you. No difference from, you know, brothers and sisters that have children. You know, they may, you know, chasten their children and put them through certain things because they see something great in them, you know, and they don't want their children to end up like, you know, other children that are out there in the world doing who knows what. So they, you know, they put their you know, they put them through these tests in a sense, so to say, right? But let's get the book of Sirach chapter 2. verse 1 through 3. It says, My son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation. Set thy heart aright, and constantly endure, and make not haste in the time of trouble. Cleave unto him, and depart not away, that thou mayest be increased at thy last end. Right? So when you come to serve the Lord, you got to prepare your soul for temptation. Right? For whatever it is that you're going to be tempted in, you got to prepare your mind to constantly serve the Lord, to constantly endure no matter what. And you can't make haste in a time of trouble. Right? Meaning when you're going through these things in life, you can't be so quick to run away. Right? This is your time to cleave even closer into the Most High. Right? To get even closer to him, to read more, to study more. Right? To pray into him. Right? So on and so forth. Right? This is the time to do these things. Right? You know, you got to endure. The scripture says in the book of Matthew, right, 24 and 13, that he that endure to the end, the same shall be saved. Right? So you have to endure unto the end. Right? And if you can't endure the little simple things, right? If you can't endure just Salakia for the background noise. If you can't endure, you know, the little small trouble things that you're going through, that the Lord is putting you through, then how are you going to endure to the very end to make it to the kingdom of heaven? If you're so quick to give up on small things that happen in your life. And not all things are small. Some things are heavy situations. But if you can't even endure those things, then how are you going to endure, you know, whatever else that the Most High is going to bring your way to make it to the kingdom? Right? Let's get the book of Isaiah chapter 55 verse 6. You know, when you're going through certain things in life, you got to cleave to the Most High. You got to seek the Lord. You know, it's the book of Isaiah chapter 55 and verse 6. It says, Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call ye upon him while he is near. Right? And that's what it's about. You got to seek the Lord while he may be found. Right? And right now the Lord can be found. And you know that because he has men on the highways and byways teaching his word. He has men that are on these platforms dropping videos left to right. You know? And that's just what it is. You know, no matter what, you got to seek the Most High God. Because at the end of the day, the Lord, he controls all things. And he obviously put you through a situation because he knew you can endure it. Or he's trying to get your attention and trying to show you something. You know? And that's just what it is. Let's get the book of Sirach. Chapter 2 and verse 4. It says, Whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully, and be patient when thou art changed to a lower state. Right? And that's just what it is. Whatever the Lord brings upon you, you have to take it cheerfully. You understand? You know? And it may be hard, but look, the reason why you take it cheerfully, because you understand that whom the Lord loves, he chastens, right? And he's dealing with them as sons and daughters. Now, if you're in this walk and you're just never going through things in life and everything's just all good and, you know, you're never having trouble, that's a scary thing. You understand? Because maybe the Lord may not be dealing with you. You know, so when you're going through these things in life, you should rejoice and be happy, understanding that, hey, the Lord is dealing with you. And he's putting you through certain things to test your faith. You understand? Because, again, he sees something in you. Right? Give me the book of, Salaki, let me get the book of 1 Samuel. Chapter 2 and verse 6. I'm going to read down to 7. It says, The Lord killeth and maketh alive. He bringeth down to the grave and bringeth up and bringeth up. The Lord maketh poor and maketh rich. He bringeth low and lifteth up. Right? So the Lord does all these things. And sometimes the Lord, he'll bring you low. You know? He'll bring you down so low to a place that you never thought you would ever be. And again, it's just that faith being placed on trial. And the Lord, if you're patient and you cleave unto him, you believe in him, he'll lift you up again. You understand? He'll pull you out of that. The Lord's not going to leave you where you're at to destroy you. Unless you're just a wicked, vile person and that's just your destruction. That's your judgment. But for those who the Lord deems worthy, he's going to put you through things and tests in life, right? To see if you're going to overcome, to see if you're worthy to be in his kingdom. You understand? And that's just what it is, right? Let me get the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 9. Book of 2 Corinthians. Chapter 12. Verse 9. And it reads, and he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. You see that? And it's those times when we're at our weakest moments in life that we're our strongest. You understand? They say in the world, hey, we don't kill you, make you stronger. But the Bible said it also. You know, so in our weaknesses and the times that we're at the lowest points of our life, and we're faced with certain situations, that's when we're our strongest. You understand? When we don't cleave, it's like when we don't depart from the Lord and we cleave unto him. You know? That's when we become stronger. You know? That's what makes us stronger. Right? You know, and dealing with infirmities, again, that goes into weaknesses, right? Affliction, or when you're fragile, right? You're made strong in those points, right? Let's get Sirach chapter 2 and verse 5. Look at Sirach 2 and verse 5. And it reads, for gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. You see that? So gold is tried in the fire, and so I can read again. For gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. So if you're acceptable in the eyes of the Lord, he's going to try you in the furnace of adversity, right? Trouble, right? Affliction, trials and tribulations, right? To prove you, right? So you can shine forth bright on the other end. So you can become that new man, right? That new sister. You understand? Get the book of Wisdom of Solomon. Chapter 3 and verse 1. And it reads, but the souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, and there shall no torment touch them. Right? So the souls of the righteous, they're in the hand of the Most High God. And the Lord's going to let no torment touch you. I mean, he's only going to allow you to go through things that you can handle. Right? And he know you can overcome. Right? I'm going to drop down to verse 4. And it reads, for though they be punished in the sight of men, yet is their hope full of immortality. Right? And this is twofold. This is going to men who, righteous men who die upon earth. You know, they give up the ghost, and so like in the eyes of the wicked, you know, it seems like, you know, they got judged. Right? But on a twofold sense, you know, dealing with tribulation and troubles and affliction, right? Sometimes, people go through things and they may be seem like, oh, the Most High is judging that brother or judging that sister because they must have did something wicked, but it could just be a test, a trial of their faith, right? It says, for though they be punished in the sight of men, yet is their hope full of immortality, and having been a little chastened, they shall be greatly rewarded. For God proved them and found them worthy for himself. See that? The Lord is proving them. Right? He's putting them through things to test them. So in the sight of the unwise, they may seem like, oh, his brother might have did something, his sister may have did something. So it's judgment. And a lot of times it is judgment. But sometimes it's the Lord proving them, putting them through things. Right? Because he finds them acceptable. And you know, he has to purify and cleanse their conscience and have them go through things so they can be better. Right? Let me get Hebrews chapter 12. Look at Hebrews chapter 12. in verse, start at 5. It says, and ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. Right? So we can't despise the chastening of the Lord, meaning you can't hate the chastening of the Lord. Right? You understand? Nor faint when thou art rebuked of him, meaning get weak and want to give up, because the Lord is putting you through some things because he's chastening you. Right? For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. You see that? So who the Lord loves, he chastens. Right? He puts them through things because he sees great in them. Right? It says, if ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are ye bastards and not sons. Right? So if you're going through things in this walk, it's because the Lord, he's chastening you. Right? It's because the Lord loves you and he's dealing with you as his sons and as his daughters. But he said if he's not chastening you, you're not going through nothing and everything's all good, then you're a bastard and not a son, meaning he's not dealing with you. So when you're going through hard things in life and in this walk, you know, you should be giving all praises to the Lord because he's dealing with you. You understand? He's dealing with you and he sees something in you that you yourself can't see. So therefore, he's going to reveal it in you. Right? Reading on, it says, furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh, which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? Right? Because people have earthly fathers that chasten them, right? And correct them, right? And when your parents did that, you gave them deep respect, right? How much more the Lord, who's the Father who created your spirit, and he chastened you, right? You should have that same respect and be not so quick to give up and call it quits, right? And want to go and dabble back in the dark side. You understand? Reading on. It says so like in verse 10, for they verily for a few days chasten us after their own pleasure, but he for our profit. See, the Lord chastens you for your profit because he sees something great in you, right? That we might be partakers of his holiness, right? So we could be partakers of the Lord's holiness, right? You know, walking in righteousness, you know, being pure, sincere, right? It says, verse 11, now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yielded peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them that are exercised thereby. Right? And when you're going through chastisement, you're going through hard things, and you're going through troublous times, it's not joyous. You know, it's not fun. You know, it's hard. You know, you may have many nights you may cry. You know, so on and so forth. But you know, you just still got to do what it is that the Lord requires, because at the end of the day, it's going to yield that peaceable fruit, right? You're going to be better than what you were before, right? It says, wherefore, lift up the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, meaning always still give praise to the Lord, and make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed. You see that? And you got to make your path straight, meaning being tunnel vision in this truth, constantly, you know, looking forward, you know, in righteousness, constantly doing the things that God wants you to do. It's the book of Proverbs 4 and verse 25. It says, let thine eyes look right on, and let thy eyelids look straight before thee. Right? Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand nor to the left. Remove thy foot from evil. Right? So you want to be, tunnel vision in this thing, man. Right? When your mind is fully set on the Lord, and you're letting nothing deter you from the path that you have to walk, no matter what it is. You know? no matter what it may be, right? Let's get the book of Sirach, chapter 2 and verse 6. It says, believe in him, and he will help thee. Order thy way aright, and trust in him, right? And that's what it's about, right? You got to believe in the Lord, right? And the Lord will help you, right? But you got to truly believe, because some say they believe, but they really don't. You got to trust in the Most High, right? And the Lord will help you in whatever situation you're facing and dealing with. You understand? Let's get the book of Sirach 32 and verse 24, right? And we're believing, it's more than just saying I believe. Believing is still doing what's right and acceptable in the eyes of God no matter what goes on, right? Keeping the commandments until the end. It's the book of Sirach chapter 32 and verse 24. He that believeth in the Lord taketh heed to the commandment, and he that trusteth in him shall fear never the worst, right? So if you believe in the Lord, you're going to keep the commandments regardless of what you're facing in life, right? Or what you're going through, right? That's what it means to believe, to have faith, right? To trust in the Most High, right? Let's get the book of Sirach chapter 2 and verse 7. Ye that fear the Lord, wait for his mercy, and go not aside lest ye fall. You see that? And if you fear the Lord, you're going to wait for his mercy. When you're going through those troublous times, you're going to wait for the Lord to have mercy on you and on your situation. And you're not going to go aside trying to figure it out on your own. The Lord said, lest you fall. And that's what happens. A lot of times people try to go and figure things out on their own. You understand? And that's where they mess up at, right? Because instead of cleaving unto the Lord, they try to make their own way, and then, they destroy themselves. The scripture said there's a way that seems right unto the man, but the end thereof are the ways of death, right? So I'd rather just wait for the Lord to have mercy, right? You don't want to lean to your own understanding, right? It's the book of Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 5 through 7. It says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thy own understanding, right? And that's what you got to do. You got to trust in the Lord with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul. And don't lean into your own understanding. Don't follow your own mind, because our hearts are desperately wicked, right? It says, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thy own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. You see that? And that's what it is, right? And that's what we have to do. See, when reading the scriptures, the Lord gives us wisdom of what we should do when we're faced with these things, right? When we're faced with, problems and troubles, in our lives. You understand? But it's the times that we want to go off and do our own thing is where we mess up, right? It's the book of Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 9. And it reads, a man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directed his steps, right? The Lord is the one who directs your steps, right? Your heart may tell you you're going to do this, you're going to do that, but at the end of the day, the Lord is the one who guides us. That's why it's important to trust in him. Because you try to guide yourself, you're going to destroy yourself, right? Verse 1. It says, Proverbs 16:1, the preparations of the heart in man, and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. You see that? Because at the end of the day, the Lord is the one who guides us, right? Let's get the book of Sirach, chapter 2 and verse 8. Ye that fear the Lord, believe in him, and your reward shall not fail. You see that? So if you fear the Lord, you're going to believe in the Lord, right? You're going to trust in the Most High, right? And your reward shall not fail, right? That reward ultimately is the kingdom of heaven. You understand? That reward is being redeemed from those troublous things that you're going through. You understand? And that's what it is, right? Reading on. It says, ye that fear the Lord, hope for good and for everlasting joy and mercy. Look at the generations of old and see, Did ever any trust in the Lord and was confounded? Or did any abide in his fear and was forsaken? Or whom did he ever despise that called upon him? You see that? The Lord will never forsake you, right? If you call upon him, you trust in him. You just got to be patient. See, a lot of people get impatient because the Lord don't answer, you know, the very same minute that you threw up that prayer. It don't work like that. You got to be patient, right? You got to be able to work in the fruits of the Spirit. And one of those fruits of the Spirit is being patient, long suffering. You got to be able to go through some things. You understand? Reading on, it says, "For the Lord is full of compassion, and mercy and long suffering, and very pitiful, and forgiveth sins, and saveth in the time of affliction." Right? The Lord will save you in the time of affliction, right? But you just got to be patient. You got to cleave into Him when you're going through those things. You understand? We got to start moving in the spirit of Job, being more like Job. See, Job went through a lot of things, and Job was a righteous man, right? But no matter what Job went through, you know, he still did the things that God required, right? He didn't give up, right? It's the book of Job, chapter 1 and verse 1. It says, "There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and escheweth evil." Right? So Job was a perfect man, right? He hated evil. He did the things that was right in the eyes of the Most High, right? And his name came up in the conversation, right? With the heavenly, with the Lord and with Satan, right? And he got put through some troublous times, right? His faith was he was put through that fiery trial, right? Which is to try you as though some strange thing happening to you, that we read in 1 Peter 4 and 12, right? I'm going to drop down to verse 6. It says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it." So Satan was, going through the earth trying to seek who he could devour. You understand? Reading on, it says, "And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doeth Job fear God for naught?" Right? So Job's name came up in the conversation, though he was righteous. Just like a lot of brothers and sisters, names come up in those conversations, and then they get put through that trial. So Satan said, "Does Job fear God for naught?" Right? Reading on. It says, "Hast thou not made a hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. Put forth now thy hand now and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face." And the Lord said unto Satan, "Behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thy hand." So Satan went from the presence of the Lord. You see that? So Satan was like, look, the only reason why Job, he fears you and all these things is because you have protection about him in his household, right? And the Lord said, look, do what you got to do, just don't kill him. Now, we just read that Job was perfect and upright. He didn't do anything wrong. But still his name came up in the conversation because his faith was being put on trial. Right? He faced troublous times. Right? When you keep reading in the story, he lost his children. His children got put to death. And when his children died, and he facing that affliction and those tribulations, though he was righteous, let's see what he did. Right? I'm going to drop down to verse 20. It says, "Then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshiped." So even though he went through this and his children died, right? Hey, Job still worshiped the Lord. It says, "And said, Naked come I out my mother's womb. So like naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly." So no matter what Job went through, and him losing his children and so on and so forth, right, and him So like in him being tested and going through these troublous times, he still worshiped the Lord, right? He still had integrity and did what was right, right? Let's get on, Salakia. Let's get the book of Romans 9 and verse 20. See, a lot of times when people go through things, you know, they question the Lord, you know? They say, why me? I never thought I'd be going through this. I didn't expect this, right? I've been doing what you asked, and so on and so forth. But the Lord does what he wants to do. You understand? And at the end of the day, whatever it is that the Lord chose to do, you still have to move righteously. You still have to have integrity. You still have to do the things that the Lord requires. You understand? You can't reply against God and ask him why. It's because he wanted to. You know, that's why you got to move like Job. Job didn't question God. He worshiped. It's the book of Romans 9 and verse 20. Nay, but O man, who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, why hast thou made me thus? Right? The Lord formed you and created you. So who are you to question the Lord and say, well, Lord, why are you putting me through this? Right? You have no authority to question the Lord, right? But whatever it is he pushed you through, be patient, pray, fast, study, read, cleave unto the Lord, right? And the Lord will have mercy on your situation, right? Let's get the book of Job, chapter 2 and verse 1, right? And it reads, again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, from whence comest thou? And Satan answered and said, from going to and fro through the earth. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, perfect and upright, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou madest me move against him, to destroy him without cause. And Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yet all that man hath would he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is in thy hand, but save his life. So after he was already put through the troublous times of losing his children, right, his name came up again. And Satan said, skin for skin. So the Lord said, look, do what you got to do. Just don't kill him. Right? Verse 7. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sores, boils from the soles of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal. And he sat down among the ashes. Then said his wife unto him, doest thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. But he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? And all this did not Job sin with his lips. You understand? And that's what it's about, right? Job understood that. Yeah, the Lord, he can give us good times, but he can also give us bad times, right? And whatever the Lord chooses to do, you still got to serve the Most High. You still got to uphold integrity. You still got to walk righteously. You understand? You still got to cleave unto the Lord, right? And that's what Job did, right? So whenever you're going through things in life, man, go read up on Job. Go read Sirach, the 2nd chapter, you know, and see how our forefathers was moving, right? You know, Job went through some stuff. You know, this is the book of Job 3 and verse 1. And it reads, after this opened Job his mouth and cursed his day, right? So Job was going through so much stuff that, you know, he cursed the day that he was born. You know, he said, why did I not die? Right? I rather would have died in the womb than to be going through the things that I'm going through. So even Job went through it. But at the end of the day, you know, he still held it down for the Lord. You know, he didn't give up. Right? This is the book of Job, chapter 3, verse 11. It says, why died I not from the womb? Why did not I give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Why did the knees prevent me? Or why the breast that I should suck? For now should I have lain still and been quiet, and I should have slept. Then had I been at rest with kings and counselors of the earth, which built desolate places, built desolate places for themselves, or with princes that had gold, who filled the houses with silver, or as in hidden untimely birth, I had not been, as infants which never saw light. There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary be at rest. There the prisoners rest together. There, they hear not the voice of the oppressors. The small and great are there. The servant is free from his master. Wherefore is light given to him that is in misery, and life unto the bitter soul. You see that? So Job was going through it, and he was, saying, damn, I should have just died from the womb. And sometimes it be like that. You go through things in life, it weighs the spirit down. But at the end of the day, you still gotta move righteously. You still gotta, do what's right. That's one thing for a fact that you have to do, right? And that's what it's about, and after all this that Job went through, him holding it down to the very end, right? The Lord, ended up blessing Job, right? It's the book of Job, chapter 42 and verse 10. It says, and the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends. Also, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before, right? So Job received twice as much as he had, because at the end of the day, he didn't give up. At the end of the day, he had integrity. At the end of the day, he still worshiped the Lord, even though he went through the things that he went through, right? And a lot of times people question that, because you could be doing everything righteous, you can fully turn your life around and do what God requires, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to go through things. You might even go through much more than the average person, because your faith, again, is being put on trial. You're being tested, right? And when you go through things, that's why it's important to be around a body, or being around godly brothers or sisters that can help uphold you in those times. That can help you out when you're dealing with certain things, to help build you back up in the faith. It's the book of Galatians 6 and verse 1. It says, brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. All right, so when a brother or sister is going through something, is the best thing to do is to be there for them and help build them up. Don't be that brother or sister that, you find out another brother or sister is going through something, and you're the one that's, got an opinion about it, saying things secretly of what you would have done, and, tell Baron and so on and so forth, when you could have been that brother or sister that was uplifting this brother or this sister in the hard times that they faced. Because the Lord said, hey, if you don't do those things, hey, it can happen to you. Then you're going to wish you had somebody there to lift you up. You understand? It says, verse 2, bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. All right, so you got to bear one another's burdens and fulfill the law of Christ, which is loving thy neighbor as yourself. Right? And that's what it's about. Right? Let's get the book of Romans, chapter 15. Romans 15 and verse 3. It says, for even Christ pleased not himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of them that reproached thee fell on me. You see that? So Christ, he didn't please himself, right? He was there for his people. He was there for the Israelites, for us, so-called blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, right? And he took our burdens upon him, and he died for our sins. And we got to move in that same spirit when our brothers or sisters are going through certain things in this walk and in life. We got to be there to uplift them, right? And when we go through these things in life, we can't be weak, right? We can't be faint, right? We can't let these things stop us and hinder us from wanting to serve the Lord, or wanting to, do what's right in the eyes of God. The book of Proverbs 24 and verse 10. If thou faint in the day of adversity, meaning if you get weak and you faint in the day of trouble and you give up, it says thy strength is small. You really didn't believe the way you thought you did. You see that? You really wasn't about the Lord, because you let something like affliction and trouble, trials and tribulations hinder you from serving the Lord. You see that? So you don't want to faint in those times, right? You want to cleave to the Lord. It's the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, and verse 28. And it reads, has thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary. There is no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to him that have no might, he increaseth his strength. Right? So the Lord, he'll increase your strength, and he'll give you might. When you're weak, when you're going through things and you feel like, you know, it's hard to bear, the Lord, he will help you through it. It says, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. You see that? And that's why it's important to wait on the Lord, you know? So no matter what you go through in life, no matter what trials and tribulations, what affliction the Lord brings your way, hey, still hold it down for the Most High, man. And be patient and understand that it's just, you know, it's just for a moment, you know? It may be for a few weeks, a few months, maybe a few years, a few days, who knows? At the end of the day, you know, still do what's right in the eyes of God and never give up. Because in our weakness, hey, we're made strong. But Lord willing, this video was edifying to at least one brother or sister. Till the next video, shalom.